Hello everyone, how's it going? A little bit of a different episode this week as we've been having a relaxed week following the Murray River from up and where we left you last week till now, settling into our new home. Days have largely been filled with a lot of walking, camping on the river's edge, and enjoying some amazing scenery, sunsets, and stars, and really sitting around and enjoying where we are. We've also added what we think are the final details to our new home, and we thought that it was about time to give you guys all the full house tour, if you like, of our 2003 Nissan Patrol. Also, if you happen to be watching this in September 2024, you can treat this as a before you buy guide of what you're getting yourself into. This video might be a bit too detailed for some people, so do feel free to skip through. I'll roughly be moving through the car from front to back and then end in the rooftop tent up top. So first up is the car itself. As I mentioned, this is a 2003 Nissan Patrol, which we bought in Melbourne and have had for some 5 weeks and been living in it for the past 4. We put about 1,500 kilometers on the clock. Like I said, we think that it's got to a place where we have all that we need and everything, more importantly, has its own home in the car. Starting up front, under the hood, we have the ZD30 5-speed manual diesel engine, which has had a little bit of work done to it. Most notable is the Forefront Industries turbo, which gives the car some much needed get up and go, especially with all the extra weight that we've added. The previous owner has also blocked the pipework that reintroduces the engine oil into the engine to be burnt off, and added an additional catch can, which helps to first limit the possibility of the engine overheating and also give the engine some extra power. All that you need to do is remember to drain the catch can every couple of months. Moving to the front, we have the air filter, which again is not stock as it's reusable. So after a couple more kilometers, we'll have to take this out, wash it, dry it, and then it's all good to go back in, which is better for the planet and for our wallet. The other addition that the keen-eyed of you will have noticed is the dual battery setup. The battery on the left is the starter battery, which is just used for getting us going, because ultimately that's the most important thing for us, is getting the engine started, but the right battery is all the fun stuff. Right now, the battery is hooked up to the solar, which is on this 12-meter cable and gives us 160 watts of power, which really helps if, like today, we're not planning on moving and running the engine. But we can still park in the shade and charge things risk-free of our second battery going dead. Speaking of what runs off that battery, so up here, the yellow is the inverter, which gives us that high voltage socket, which allows us to charge laptops and stuff. Blue is for the lights and red is for the 12-volt socket system that we've got set up in the back, but I'll show that off later. With the hood shut, all that's left to point out is the radio antenna, but we'll go over that more once we're in the car. The 2 spotties at the front, the big bull bar to help us in the unfortunate event of a rather ambitious kangaroo, and the light bar running across the top. With all the lights on, it's basically daylight straight ahead any time of day. So although we try not to, we are rather set up for any night drives we might want to do. The final thing up front is the Access snorkel, which will help us in future river crossings on the Gibbs River Road up north. Coming around to the side, we've got an awful lot of wheel with these Toyo Open Country Muddies, which are just what you want on loose sand and mud when we're in more of the remote parts of Australia. The previous owner also had the whole car lifted and given it's some upgraded suspension, which again we do appreciate with the extra weight that we've put on it. Although in giving himself extra clearance, he has also removed the side step, which is great for rougher terrain, but is a little more challenging to hop up into the cab. Getting into the driver's seat, starting with the dash, we have a rather normal dash. The only thing to point out is the sub-tank on the fuel gauge, which indicates the additional 25-litre tank that we have, which means with the main tank and the 20-litre Jerry out the back, we can carry up to 145 litres when fully topped up, which is great for those long stretches, especially across the Nullarbor Desert, where fuel can be few and far between. On the right, we have some additional aftermarket dials here. At the top, we have the radiator temperature, which gives you the engine temp, which is especially important if you are driving for prolonged stretches during extremely hot days. Good to know what the temperature is so that your radiator doesn't explode because it's overheated and the fluids inside it have turned to steam. If you do care what the operating temperature is, it's around 80 degrees, and on hot days it can get up to a little over 90, but we've got it set to peak at 100, at which point it starts beeping, letting you know that you're pushing the car quite hard and it might be a good idea to pull over and give the engine a rest for a few minutes. Continuing the theme of preserving the car, the second dial is the turbo indicator, which similarly gives you a beep every time you're over revving the engine. But this is also designed to preserve the engine, so especially like a couple of weeks ago when I was getting the car off the beach and heavy four-wheel driving in that soft sand, it does beep at you quite a lot, so you can actually switch it off if it does start to annoy you. Continuing the theme of preserving the engine, over to the left we have the turbo timer. This basically keeps the engine idling when you've turned off the ignition, and it allows the turbo some time to slow down and cool, not to damage it. This can also be set anywhere from as little as 30 seconds up to 5 minutes. We've normally default set it to 30, but after particularly long drives you can leave it running for a little longer. Below that we've got the all-important bass level, which is hooked up to the massive subwoofer under Holly's seat to ensure that we've got the tunes blasting while we're driving along. And then below that we have the radio. So when I turn it on, this is automatically set to 11, which is the open channel for comms in Australia. The other two channels to remember are 5 and 35, which are the emergency channels to call if you're in distress, and all the others are free for you to use. Normally, if we're out and about or on more remote roads, we'll set this to just cycle, just in case anyone's out there that needs help, or if there's someone sending out a fire warning or any additional info that might be of use to us. Onto the center console, we have pretty much all you could want: the full Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, Bluetooth, radio, and probably some more features that I still haven't fully appreciated. Below that, we have the pretty self-explanatory but much needed air conditioning. And finally, below that, we have some extra unmarked buttons. Going from left to right, we have the switch to change the closed circuit of the starter and second battery. In short, if the starter battery, which is shown on the display over here, is running low, make sure that it is switched so that you're preserving the charge as you're driving so that you can start the car once you stop. Next to that is the light bar, which is hooked up to the full beams, which reminds me that the fog light switch on the left of the steering wheel here is hooked up to the spotties on the front, which again is activated when you go on full beam. Looking around, some final things to note are the normal lights up top, a sunglass storage, fully electric windows, and central locking on my door. And I've got spots here for my hat, sunglasses, sliders when I'm not in camp, water bottles, etc. Over on Holly's side, she has the all-important inverter in her footwell that I mentioned earlier. There's the glove box with all the car stuff in her door, as well as the navigation paperwork and guidebooks. In the middle of the car, we have all our belongings packed into packing cubes within car organizers. We also have our bedding and the high lift jack, as well as space to store the tent ladder and the solar panels for when we're on the move. Heading round to the back, we have the fuel tank for both sub and main tanks, and the recovery tracks and our dirty bag on the spare wheel arm, which in our attempt to be somewhat eco-friendly has a split for recycling and general waste. Coming around the back, we have the rear awning and the double back doors that effectively create our kitchen space. So on the main rear door, we have the drop-down stainless steel shelf that fits the hob and prevents the door from melting. The hob is a simple dual burner which is hooked up to this 4-kilo LPG cylinder, which we can refill at most servos, which lasts us about 2 weeks and costs us about £8 to refill. In the back, we have our drinking water in our 15-litre esky cooler, which lasts us about 2 to 3 days, depending on how strict we're being with ourselves. Behind that, we have some engine oil and the compressor, which allows us to inflate or deflate the tires depending on the terrain to give us some much needed traction. We also have general laundry room stuff, detergent, hoover, blender, fire blanket if things get really bad, everything else you could want. Next up is our fridge. We have 2 compartments that we can set independently, so if the need arose that we needed a freezer, we could. But we found that because we're only doing a single weekly shop we've needed the extra fridge space. So in the far one, we have our fresh fruit and veggies, and in the closer one, we have some prep meals and alcohol. It seems covers most of the essentials. The fridge is wired into this rear 12-volt socket system that I mentioned earlier, which has a second display that shows the voltage in that second battery. As you can see, it's getting boosted by the solar at the moment. The additional sockets are used for the tent lights, the 12-volt fan, or the Hoover, depending on what we need. And we also have some slow charge USB spots back here as well. Underneath all of this are the drawers with all our dry foods, cutlery, and spaces to store the hob when we're on the road. There may look like there's quite a lot of space back here at the moment, but trust me, once we've got the table and the chairs and all the extra things packed in, it does fit quite snug. Continuing around the car to the jerry arm, which holds our washing water, but I'd say 90% of the time it's also drinkable water if we needed. It has the most luxurious golden tap, even if I do say so myself, that pours water currently all over our washing up. And the yellow jerry is full of diesel. It's not normally full, but in the last town, the price of diesel was about £1 a litre. So we really made the most of it and filled up that. Next up, we have the side awning and the catch-all fold-out table and chairs, which are both dinner table, desk, worktop, storage shelves, all rolled up into one, depending on what we need them to be at the time, and the much needed fly trap that does the most at keeping our buzzy buddies at bay. Last but not least, we have the tent up top. Climbing up the ladder, you can see that we've got somewhat of an elevated view from up here when we're all zipped up with the windows open. It's not too dissimilar to a childhood treehouse. One of the cool features of the tent is that it's got a carpeted roof, which is perfect for Velcro. So as you can see, we've made the most and attached lighting as well as Holly's tablet and really anything else you might want to stick up here in the future. To be honest, it's pretty self-explanatory up here. There's plenty of little pockets around the edge to store things, and there's plenty of space for the two of us to be up here, with even some standing room for Holly at the tallest point. To be honest, that's more or less rounds up the car tour video. Let us know if you have any other questions about things, and I'm sure we'll be happy to answer. Thanks for listening once again, and we'll see you in next week's video.